Good afternoon, guys. Get your ass in the outdoors. Today's episode, we're going to review the bait system that I've come up with to be able to transport bait from a shop like Hammond's or Oakwood to your house and get the bait to your boat. If, say, for example, like in my case, it's in the water all the time. I only pull it out of the water to refuel, really, and to do maintenance on the vessel. So I'll go through a few things that I've come up with. If you're a recreational fisherman and you're having problems with bait on your boat, or keeping bait alive on your boat, or getting bait to your boat, you live on the lake, the system I've come up with works pretty good. And let me go over the basic steps. What I do is, in my vessel, I start running my live well pump, my recirculator, in the night before I go fishing. And I have one of the Frabill large pumps that has dual air stones that I put into the vessel's bait well. It's a 30-gallon bait well, effectively. Now, I don't use one of the fancier, more expensive bait wells because of the Everglades that I have is highly insulated. It really holds the bait at the right temperature once I get it to that temperature. So I really don't worry too much about keeping an extra bait system on the boat. My well does really well if I pre-oxygenate the water and then keep the water temperature cool. So what I do to keep the water temperature cool in my boat is I freeze bottles of water in one of my freezers. Can't quite see this from here, but looking inside there, you can see the bottles of water. So I keep 3 of those bottles on the boat in a cooler, in a Yeti cooler up front, and so then the boat is prepared. Basically, I'll maybe put a little pool salt or some shad keeper in there to speed up the process, but it's not really needed on the lake as long as I can get aeration into it. As long as I can aerate the water and get the temperature down, we're in pretty good shape. So the next task is to bring bait from a place like Hammond's, which in my case, it's only 10 minutes away from my house. So I'm able to get it to my house, but I still lose a few baits if I don't have a properly prepared system, like like for example, if I'm not using a bag or an air bag, I like to use these bait buckets. I use blue Ace Hardware buckets. I think blue keeps the fish more calm. Effectively, what I do is I take my aerating system here and I hook it up overnight, and I run aeration into the bait bucket before I go to Hammond's. I also add a little shad keeper in here because I'm using tap water from the garden hose. That does a fine job of taking the chlorine and the other products that our county and city put into the water out long enough that I can get it here to the house. So what I have is a system where I can plug and unplug this aquarium aerator in and out, so that I don't burn up all the batteries on my bait box, on my bubble box. Okay, so what I'll do when I leave here is I'll hook up the bubble box. I'll go to Hammond's, have this filled up. I can fit 4 to 5. 5 is a little bit much, but 4 dozen blueback herring in this 5-gallon bucket. And it's going to vary from person to person because as you get further and further away from the lake, if you've got a half-hour run to and from the lake, you're going to be really stretched on how many shad you can put in there. How many herring. The system I've come up with, that's our bait keeper. I can keep bait in this tank for as long as 7 days, sometimes longer. I really haven't tested it to go longer because I'm usually fishing. So, the big challenge is if you're a charter captain or you're doing any work, is that you don't want to always be over at Hammond's at 4:30, 5 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning waiting in line to get bait. You want to have that bait, especially in my case, here at the house, to where I can just shuttle it right down to the boat first thing in the morning when I need to meet a client. So came up with a small, usable system. This will hold, I've had this with 5 dozen shad or 5 dozen herring in it with no problem for 7 to 8 days. I put this together for probably a little less than $90 total. And let me go down the kind of list of what we got here. This is a toy bucket from Walmart. They're $5. This is an aquaculture dual aerator. These are, I think this was $13. If you'll take the camera and put it in, you'll see a large air stone, which I don't have running right now. I've got the aerator running on my bubble, you know, in place of my bubble box. And I've got a large air stone in the bottom of the bait bucket. And if you can angle that camera in order to see, you'll see that I have an $18 pond pump that you can purchase in the lawn and garden section at Home Depot. What that does is it's moving water from the bottom of the tank up through this 7/8, I think it's 5/8 inch inside diameter or half-inch inside diameter hose that you can also pick up in the plumbing section at Home Depot through a colander. Now what I've done here is I've purchased, you'll point over there, some in the hobby section, a bag of low loft pillow fill is basically what that is. So it's polyfill. I put a few layers of that in the bottom of this colander, and when I'm in the bottom of the colander, I place some activated charcoal, which you'll see on the bottom right there, into the polyfill. I fold it over and then place a few Scotch-Brite pads on top. The Scotch-Brite pads effectively remove the large particulate scales, a little bit of slime. Their real focus is to just kind of pull out any dirt and any excrement that might come out of the fish that you know would normally gum up the polyfill. So you get a two-stage filter basically this way. Now it's a 20-gallon bucket basically, maybe a little less because I've got the colander elevated above the water. But I'll add a little bit of Morton's pool salt, which is $3 a bag at Walmart for 30 pounds, about a cupful of that. And then I add some shad keeper, because again, this is water that's coming out of my tap. And I let this run in condition for up to 2 days before I even start thinking about my first trip, or you know, the first time I use it. After you get it, the system kind of built and it's running on its own, it's just a matter of adding and removing particulate by using the filter and using extra newer charcoal and things of that nature. So the procedure then is to take the bait bucket, aerate it, get it to Hammond's, fill it full of bait, bring it home, place it in your bait bucket, or I mean in your bait keeper here in the garage, which that water right there is 72 degrees. I just broke my thermometer, so I can't show you, but it's 72 degrees right now, and it stays that way. Sitting on a concrete floor, obviously, so it's kind of nice. But that bait stays really fresh in there. And then I can just ladle the bait out in the morning into another bucket and take it down to the boat, which is already pre-aerated with some ice blocks. And I've got good fresh bait. Never have seen bait that's so active and lively all day long. And I don't run my obviously don't run my live well from that point forward. It's the water that I put in there the night before, and it stays that way, and I rarely have to add any. If I do, it's going to be cooled off by my ice blocks. So I just thought I'd share that with you guys to kind of, you know, maybe give you guys a hack once in a while that will maybe shorten your time at the bait shop and give you some good fresh bait, because taking the bait and putting it in a bag in a bucket is just not always the best way to go. And you know, obviously the more seasoned guides and more folks that are a little bit more particular are using large bait tanks and storage systems that can obviously smooth out those curves and allow them to keep bait for many weeks at a time. But this works pretty good. So get your ass in the outdoors and try it. And this is Captain Chris signing off. See ya.